Get full episodes of The Damage Report as a podcast on iTunes and Android, and you can watch the live show every weekday on YouTube TV. Obviously, things are looking pretty bad in America over the past couple of years, but is there a case to be optimistic about the future? I'm not gonna make that case to you, but we do have someone who I think is qualified to. Dr. Jonathan Salk, welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. So you assistant clinical professor at UCLA, but very well known for this book, A New Reality. If you come to me, you gonna see the book? There you go. And so I want to talk to you about the thesis of this book as updated for modern times. So you have had a belief for decades about the arc of human evolution in terms of population and how that affects human civilization and culture.
Right.
So what is that thesis?
The basic thesis is that that we're in a time of conflict, and that there's a way into it and a way out of it. Looking at it from the standpoint of population, we've had centuries or millennia of population increase without limits, without a ceiling to growth. And we're entering a time where there's gonna be ceilings to growth and we have to adapt to a new situation. The big idea is that we're moving from a time in which values of competition, independence, and rampant unlimited scavenging of resources changes to a time where we're interdependent, cooperative, and operating on a basis of sustainability.
So you believe that during a time where the population is growing, and over the past 100 years or so, it's growing particularly rapidly, that inspires people to be more competitive, to sort of squabble over resources, try to gobble everything up.
Exactly.
But that will transition as the population growth levels off or starts to decline. We won't have that anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
In order to adapt to a world in which we have limits, we will, in order to survive, we'll actually, not automatically, but with a great deal of effort, change our value system.
Okay, so you originally wrote this book with your father back in 1981,
right?
Correct? Okay,
right.
So if we take those two data points, so 1981, 2018, back decades ago, you were saying we expect that this change is going to happen, it will level off. How have the intervening decades affected your belief in that? Is it playing out the way that you suspected?
It is playing out. I mean, if we look at UN population projections, population growth began slowing about 15 or 20 years ago, and will level off at around 10, 11, 12 billion, depending on how we handle it, which is still a lot of
extra people.
But it is scheduled to, it is projected to level off, barring disaster, barring other changes.
So why is that? Why has it been leveling off?
Well, it's a really interesting story. It's one of the great stories that's sort of embedded in the book. But it turns out that as people's lives improve, as education of women, infant mortality goes down, health conditions and sustainable development, people decide to have smaller families in order to adapt to those different conditions. So it's a real win-win in that improving people's lives slows the population growth even faster.
Which potentially could then improve people's lives long term.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly.
Interesting, okay, so I am curious, one thing sort of, at the same time that we're seeing this potential transition from a rapidly accelerating growth of human population to it leveling off or even declining in the next 70 or so years, I think is a number that I saw you cite.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have this battle over climate change, which is sort of radically altering the ability of the earth to sustain human life. How do you see that influencing, if at all, this process?
Oh, I mean, it's a huge part of the process. And to sort of state the obvious, we need to adapt, we need to slow climate change and basically stop it if we're to survive and if the other species are gonna survive. What we get though, and what we've got now is just tremendous conflict of like the old set of values that are based on growth, fossil fuels, and basically competition and exploitation. And that's coming a cropper of and in conflict with a new set of values that we need to adapt in order to survive in the conditions of the future. And so we're seeing just a tremendous amount of conflict around that. The way out of it is actually to transition to those new values.
Okay, so that begs the question, what do we as individuals and governments do to manage that transition over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 decades?
A lot.
Okay. Okay, well, we can at least start the conversation.
All right, that's good. It's actually, this kind of change is going to affect every level of society. So we definitely need to address issues of climate change, But we also need to address our social and political systems, because our social and political systems have been based on growth and unlimited exploitation of resources. We're going to be entering a new time where that's not true. So we need to generate these new economies. So there's room for people at the theoretical level and at the policy level to do this. In terms of people's lives, we need to raise kids who have these values. We need to operate by these values in the course of our daily lives, in our work, in our community, in our politics, in our public.
So you mentioned generating these new economies. So specifically on the economy, do you see? So we have some assumptions about industry, what the role of corporations in our society is, how they should operate. Obviously, they are produced to generate the most profit possible. They might be the purest example of the value system that you describe under the current growth of population. Do you see that changing? Is that going to be a thing that we just need to change how we view these corporations? Are governments going to need to exert more control over the economy?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure I don't have a slam dunk answer to it, but I do have a perspective on it, which is that that corporations will need to evolve themselves in terms of the values, in terms of what they do, both in response to public opinion policy, but also in terms of, I think, in terms of what is profitable for them, what helps their own survival. The interesting thing about this change that I'm describing is it isn't just because it's a goody two-shoes thing. It isn't just because it's morally right or morally better. It's that from a pragmatic standpoint, in order for us to survive and to live together, these are changes that will evolve and that have to evolve.
Okay, so look, I think that you give a good reason, going forward, to be optimistic. So just take a mental snapshot of the optimism and keep that in the background. As I ask one more question that's a little bit more pessimistic, what could go wrong? So what could happen in the next half century to stop this transition that you've sketched out from happening? A
lot. The biggest danger we have is a significant number of people clinging to the old values, sort of turning back. I mean, what we've got at this point is an uncertain point of transition, and we've got one set of people who are looking forward to the newer values. We've got one set of people who say, I don't know what the heck is going on here. I want to be back. I want to be back with the old values. I want to be great again. There's a danger if we do that we're going to decimate the planet. There's also a danger that if we continue with isolationist, independent policies, that we provoke war and the results both in famine and potentially nuclear destruction. So there's a lot that can go wrong.
And we have seen before that when you have these times of great social and economic change, some of the people who we're transitioning away from don't take that well. And like an animal with their back to the wall, they can lash out.
Yes, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're dealing with. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that what we're seeing in our current political climate is a last gasp of those values as we enter into the future.
Oh, well, there's some more optimism for you. We can actually, as hoped, end on a note of optimism. So, Dr. Jonathan Salk, great to have you here.
It was really great to be here.
Thank you, John. The book is A New Reality. If you're feeling anxious, as apparently at least 70% of you are, give this a read and feel a little bit of optimism going forward. If not for us, at least for our kids.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.